Hey, good morning. I'm very excited to talk about the best day for fasting, which is feast day. Feast day is super important, and I like to think about the feast day as, almost like the rest day for your workout. So for people who work out really hard, the rest day actually becomes one of the most important days of their training because that's where your body reaps the benefits of all the work that you've been doing. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again because it's so important. With ketosis, with fasting, these are nutritional and therapeutic strategies. We are not intended to stay in a state of ketosis long term. What we want to do is we want to dip in, we want to dip out, and the feast day becomes a really important part of that. So I did a phenomenal interview with Dr. Mindy Peltz, where we talked about the importance of feast day in regards to balancing hormones and also in regards to building muscle. And we have to incorporate the feast day in order to do both of those. So that is a great resource, and that will be uploaded on Thursday onto the YouTube channel. Okay, so let's go over the what, why, the how, and when with feast day. All right, so what is our feast day? Anytime we're talking about fasting, you're often going to hear about ketosis, and here's why. Intermittent fasting can pretty much be done without going into ketosis, without becoming fat adapted. Anytime you're fasting beyond an intermittent fasting window, when you're pushing closer to the 24 hours, the 1 meal a day, which you really want to hit the longer fast, like 17, 18, 19 hours, building up to 24 hours in order to enhance autophagy. Autophagy is our body's natural ability to detoxify itself and to get rid of toxic sick cells and to enhance stem cell production. So as you're pushing the fast longer, it benefits us to get into a state of ketosis. What happens when we're in ketosis is our body is no longer relying on outside fuel sources like glucose. And so our body dips into our fat stores when we don't have food coming in. That's key. That's what makes fasting easier for people who think they can't fast because they need to eat every 2 or 3 hours. Getting into ketosis is key, and getting into ketosis correctly and the healthy way is what's super important. It's part of why I'm doing this fasting series for free, and then it's also what we do in our 7-week virtual program. We teach you exactly how to get into ketosis, and I highly recommend that for anyone who's wanting to push the fasting past intermittent fasting. It makes it super easy. Okay, so feast day is when we pull out of ketosis for most people. And you increase your carbs and your protein. So a lot of people know that ketosis is lower net carbs, 50 or below for most people will get you into ketosis. What a lot of people don't realize is that the protein also has to be a little bit low, and here's why. If we have a certain amount of protein, and that amount is different for every person, your body will actually start making sugar out of it. It's a process called gluconeogenesis. And so that will throw you out of ketosis. So I think, particularly for men who are used to a really high protein diet, some people will struggle to get into ketosis until they lower their protein a little bit. So on your feast day, you open up that window and you throw in more protein. So it's usually increased carbs, increased protein. Why do we do a feast day? Again, so important. When we are fasting and when we are using ketosis as a strategy, we are lowering our insulin, which is really good. However, we do need insulin for certain biochemical processes in our bodies. We need to add in this diet variation in order to balance our hormones and our adrenal glands. So again, staying in ketosis long term is not only not beneficial, but it can actually harm other processes in our body. So it's really important to add in the variation. When do we do this? When do we feast? Okay, so for a lot of people, what they'll do is something called a 5-1-1, and I've talked about this in other videos. 5 days of intermittent fasting, 1 day of a feast day, and 1 day of a longer fast. So that's typically how I live. That's my maintenance mode. So I'll do the 5 days of intermittent, meaning I'll go about 14 to 16 hours between meals. And you do count when you rest. You do count when you're sleeping. I'll do 1 day a 24-hour fast, which I could have never imagined doing this even a number of years ago. I do that my busiest day in the office because I feel the best. I feel the most clear. And it just makes life easier. I don't have to think about eating. And then I do one feast day. And that day I will usually leave for like date night or a day out with friends. So that's usually what I do on Saturdays. So 5-1-1 is typically how people work this in. Feasting is also really important, women. For those of you that still have your cycle, we actually want to do typically about a 3 to 5 day higher carb diet before we start our periods. So, and again, that's different for everybody, but the longer you do this, it's like you just feel and you know when you need those carbs. It will help your cycle regulate. It'll help you feel better on your cycle. We also need to throw in progesterone-rich foods at certain times during our cycle. And those foods are beans, squashes, rice, potatoes, citrus, and tropical fruits, higher carb foods that typically are not included in ketogenic living. So it's super important to add in progesterone-rich foods around day 21 up until day 28. For some people, again, that window, can be smaller or bigger. So I will usually, like 2 or 3 days before my cycle begins, I will increase my carbs. Also during day 12, like somewhere around mid-cycle, around ovulation, when we get a spike of estrogen, it's important to incorporate these foods as well. And Mindy and I go into a lot of this during her interview. So that's important. Also for women who are trying to get pregnant, we need the progesterone stores. And for women that are perimenopausal, they do as well. So these foods become really important to work in, and you work those in during your feast day because they are higher carb. Okay, and then how do we do a feast day? There's 3 different ways, and Mindy and I talk about this on the interview as well on Thursday. That'll be released. So there's 3 different ways you can do a feast day, 3 different goals, I guess I should say. One can be to build your hormones. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. And you incorporate specific foods that help balance and build your hormones. 2 is in order to build muscle, and you do that by increasing protein. So this is big for anyone who's wanting to build muscle. If they're concerned about losing muscle mass during fasting, fasting will lean you out. You will not, your body doesn't go into your stores of muscle, it goes into your stores of fat. So you're going to decrease your fat. So for most people, you do not notice muscle wasting, but for a lot of people that want to really not bulk up, but get that definition, there's a process called mTOR. And the way you stimulate mTOR in order to build more muscle is by increasing your protein at specific times and with specific cycles. So that becomes important. So for anyone wanting to do that on your feast day, you actually increase your protein to 150 grams or more. Carbs on a feast day usually are 100 to 200 grams. Okay, so there's building hormones as a goal. There's increasing muscle or building muscle as a goal and stimulating mTOR. There's also the release valve, as Mindy calls it. I love that term. Release valve is eat whatever you want. So this is kind of where you just put those foods that you've been missing. I think particularly for people that are new to fasting, this is your day where you go back to your old habits. What's really neat is the longer you do this, just naturally, the cleaner those sources are going to become. So my feast day used to be, like pizza or a burger or whatever it is that I was missing, or a night out with friends. And now my feast day, I choose and I really gravitate towards these cleaner sources of carbohydrates because it's just what makes me feel better. But that can be your, what some people call a cheat day. I don't like to use that term because you're not doing anything wrong. You are literally incorporating diet variation, which is super important for this lifestyle. So that is perfectly fine to do, particularly at the beginning. I think we do want to move towards cleaner sources of carbs, but if you want that to be your free-for-all, that's fantastic. What is key, and again, something that you learn in the 7-week program, how do you reset yourself out of a feast day? So if you go crazy, or if you increase your carbs and you just throw everything in this day, what do you do the next day to get yourself back out? So for some people, when they have these feast days, maybe it turns into a slippery slope. And so you just keep incorporating these foods and you don't know how to get back on track. What's key in making this successful part of your lifestyle is knowing how to reset yourself out of it, and it actually becomes very easy. So everybody knows for themselves is exactly what you have to do to get back into ketosis, to jump right back into fasting, intermittent fasting even. Becomes a very purposeful process. So that's something we teach in the 7-week course as well. These are all Kaya's little drawings. She was helping me. Okay, so feast day, super important. The interview with Dr. Minnie that'll be released on Thursday is a phenomenal resource. She's super passionate about women and hormone health in regards to feasting and ketosis and diet variation. So she's a great resource for you guys, and I will post her platforms as well. If you have any questions, as always, just feel free to drop them below.